Hello and welcome. My name is Racho, and I have three themes I want to cover really. Why Blast is now king, the meta, the 100%. Why Viral Slash, I don't want to say bad, but is it really nearly as good as it used to be anymore? And why Cold will never be good, which is a little extra bonus bit of content at the end of this video. The main discussion will be how Blast has dethroned Viral Slash completely. So there are a few changes that came in this update that have led to this. The big one obviously being the change to the Blast status effect. But there were some additional changes that were pretty important in deciding why this has happened, and we will cover them before I explain why these changes mean what they mean. So first of all, Blast. Blast was arguably the worst damage type in the entire game before the update. It was very bad as a raw damage type, as it was good against Machine, the Machine health type, which very little enemies had. Really, the only enemies that did have it were the little roller Grenier units and Thumpers on the Plains of Eidolon. Angels on the Derriman also had it, but they're basically the only enemies that had the machinery health type. So Blast was very bad as a raw damage, and its status effect was terrible, as it literally just made enemies less accurate. You know what else makes enemies less accurate? Killing them. Blast was arguably much worse than both Puncture and Impact, as Puncture and Impact were the other two bad damage types. The other damage types are all good or really good, where these three were all kind of pretty low down. But Puncture and Impact both have their niche. Impact had its niche with the mods like Internal Bleeding and Hemorrhage, which would get you Slash. So it had its niche through that way, and Puncture gave you a crit chance buff, so it had its niche through there. So at least they actually had a niche where Blast didn't. Blast was just completely garbage. But now Blast is king. So what changed with Blast? Well, I already briefly covered this in my Jade build, but I'm going to go in a bit more detail now. Basically, the way Blast works now is when you first apply a Blast status effect, it does a little AoE explosion for a percentage of the damage your weapon did. And then after 1.5 seconds after the proc was initially procced, it will then do an additional explosion, and then the status effect will be removed from the enemy. So it's not really damage over time, as it just does an initial explosion when it gets first procced, and then a second explosion 1.5 seconds later. And modding for status duration will increase that cooldown between the two explosions. However, if you manage to get to 10 blast procs before the 1.5 second proc, it will do a much bigger AoE for 100% of the damage of your weapon. Written a 5 meter AoE. I'm not sure how big the AoE of the individual procs are, but the 10 proc explosion is a 5 meter AoE, and it will completely reset all the blast procs on the enemy. So the blast procs will be gone, meaning you can just reapply them straight away. This is really powerful, as it creates an AoE explosion to all of your shots. And if you're using, well, really any weapon, but especially high status applying weapons, especially beam weapons, which double dip with multi-shot when it comes to status effects, it's just ridiculously powerful. It's basically gas, but way better. And if you don't know, gas actually scaled the best with health before this update. It just got destroyed by armor. But now we have Blast, which doesn't get destroyed by armor, and is better than what gas was anyway. So that's the changes that happened to the Blast status effect that turned it from being really bad into a very good status effect. What other changes have caused and happened though, which have led to the downfall of Viral Slash? Well, number one, enemy armor is now capped. So a big thing about Viral is when you get to high levels, enemy's armor would be so high, enemy armor would be so high, the best option would to just be use Slash because it ignores enemy armor. But enemy armor is capped, it doesn't scale like that anymore. Theoretically, you could have an enemy which is at level 9,999, which is the level cap, having the same armor value as an enemy at level 200. I don't know if that's actually true because of numbers and stuff, but theoretically you could have that. where you wouldn't before. Additionally, enemies' health now scale faster. So enemies' armor is reduced, but enemies' health is improved. Now, Slash isn't bad against health, but it was never... Its scaling off enemy health was never the reason why we used it. We used it because of how well it scaled with enemy armor. That being, it completely ignored the enemy armor. Other options, such as Viral Heat, as because of the way Heat Inherent works, you can get a super powerful damage over time effect from the Heat arm proc, scaled with health much better. You know what else scaled with health much better? Gas Electric setups. And since we already discussed, Blast is essentially Gas Electric, but better, Blast also scales really, really well with enemy health. The issue with all three of these builds, less so with Viral Heat, but still a bit with Viral Heat, is enemy armor and how much they scaled, which is what made Viral Slash meta. But since enemy armor is capped now, the need for Slash is greatly reduced. Viral Slash isn't bad. It's still good, it will still kill. And I haven't gone to level cap with Blast and then verse Viral Slash, because I would literally have to do an endurance run doing Viral Slash and then compare that to Blast, so I haven't done that. So it may still scale better than Blast. I can't say it doesn't, as I haven't tested it, but based on the theoretics of how the game plays and how the armor now caps at a certain armor value, which is 90% damage reduction, I believe 90% damage reduction, Slash isn't needed anymore. Not like it used to be, at least, which opens the way up for things like Viral Heat. Viral Heat would still be very good because Heat Inherent is very powerful, and Blast. In fact, Blast has a benefit over Slash and Heat builds, especially on lower levels, because Slash and Heat and other damage types, or most other damage types, they take a second before they actually start applying the damage over time. They don't immediately start damaging enemies. Blast immediately damages enemies on its first proc, and then you have to wait 1.5 seconds for its second hit. But if you're killing enemies with the first hit anyway, that doesn't matter. And if you can apply status effects fast enough and get to that 10 proc, it will proc immediately, no matter how long it's waited. So if you apply 10 procs in under a second, it will do that massive 5-meter AoE explosion for 100% of your weapon's damage on every enemy with that 10 blast procs, and then you can just go ahead and reapply those 10 blast procs. So it has an immediate damage, unlike things like Slash and Heat, making it much better for base steel path enemies that can easily be killed with raw damage setups, which are honestly arguably more effective than dot builds on base steel path steel path, because you don't need to wait for that period, that tick, for the damage to actually start hurting enemies. But with Blast, it just blows everything up. In fact, the footage you are seeing right now is literally just a Blast turret. It doesn't even have corrosive, which is another point I will get to in a second. It doesn't have corrosive, it is just a Blast turret, and it's wiping out enemies. I'm running it on Revenant for survivability, but I don't have any damage buffs, like ability buffs or anything like that running right now. I literally just have my second for survivability on Revenant, and I'm just killing with Torrid. To be sure, Torrid is a very, very powerful weapon, but you can see how stupid Blast is now. This beats Viral Slash, because my previous Torrid build was a Viral Slash build, and this kills much faster. And because of the armor cap, Slash isn't needed anymore. So yeah, Slash has kind of lost its place in the game, which is crazy to say. Gas and Electric, yes, with an armor strip that could still be really good. Heat and Viral, I don't see going away because of the way Heat Inherent works, especially for secondaries. But Blast is just amazing right now, super easy to set up. 100% the new meta in this game, without a doubt. It's just that good. And that's even without considering corrosive, as the other two elements that don't go into making Blast are Toxic and Electric, which make corrosive. So you can have a setup where you're armor stripping enemies by 80% because of the corrosive procs and blowing them up with Blast. If you have 2 Emerald Shards, you're now fully armor stripping enemies and blowing them up with Blast. That 100% will make Blast scale better than Viral Slash. It may even make it scale than Heat viral, but I don't want to make that claim because Heat Inherent is quite funky and can do some funky dunky stuff. But Blast would definitely be a much easier setup, especially if you're using Corrosive, but I'm not on this build. Like, it's killing without needing any armor strip. Though if you wanted to scale it a bit better, it might need an armor strip. But you can just add Corrosive and you get that armor strip. Easy as that. You want more than an 80% armor strip, just add 2 emerald shards and you have a full armor strip. And you're literally blowing enemies up because Blast explodes. Literally. Like, it's just insane how powerful Blast is now. Which brings me to my next point, and as to why Cold will never be good. So the funny thing about Cold is I feel like every second update for like the past year or so, we have gotten a buff to Cold. And the funny thing is, Cold wasn't bad to begin with. It wasn't great. It's definitely a lot better now than what it was. But it wasn't Blast, Impact, or Puncture. It was never that bad. And the fact is now, Cold is really damn good. Cold will freeze enemies completely with 10 cold procs and double your crit damage. Even without the 10 cold procs, you'll still be slowing enemies and giving yourself a crit damage buff. Like, Cold is really good. But let's for a second consider the damage types that Cold mixes into to make. First of all, Viral, which although Viral Slash might not be good as good anymore, Viral isn't going anywhere. Definitely not for primers, because Viral is just amazing, or for Viral Heat builds. So first of all, Viral, and what else does Cold make? Blast. The point I'm making is the damage types that Cold makes are so much better and will always be better than Cold that there'll never be a reason to use Cold, as doing so would mean giving up the better options, being Viral or Blast. Even Magnetic, which is the third element that Cold makes, is pretty good now because it will increase the damage against Overguard. Cold actually mixes into 2 meta and a third really good stat damage type in this current setup, in the current state of the game, meaning no matter how good Cold is as a status effect, it will never be used outside meme builds or on Frost. Frost does have a specific use case for it because of the Guardian Frost augment, but besides Frost, Cold will never be used outside of meme builds. Which is sad because it's a really good status effect. It actually is. Blast and Viral are just better, and you would never want to use Cold over Blast or Viral, especially because Blast will just kill everything. You don't need to crowd control enemies or give a crit damage buff where Blast can just kill them outright. Like, it's just not something you ever need. This is why Epitaph is the single best primer in the game. People say, oh, it's either Kuvanuka or Epitaph. No, it's Epitaph. Because it force procs Cold. You can get that crit damage buff, you can slow enemies, and still mod for Viral at the same time. You can have Viral and Cold together. You can't do that on Nucor. I don't know of any gun that you can do that with besides Epitaph, but I'm sure there is at least 1 or 2 others. Lens would be an example, but Lens is trash. And Epitaph can be taken even further, as you could put on the Radiation mod. Now you have a weapon that is making enemies shoot each other, slowing them, giving you a crit damage buff, and making you do more damage to their health. Honestly, Epitaph with Radiation and Viral is the best crowd control Warframe in the game, and it's a gun. Like, Epitaph is cracked, and we'll be getting Epitaph Prime soon. Think about that one. But outside of Epitaph, outside of Frost, you'll never use Cold because Viral and Blast exist. Even Magnetic will stop Cold from being used because now Magnetic is good too. Which is really sad because it's a really good status type. Only way to fix this, it does not matter how good DE makes Cold, the only way to fix this would be making Cold so good that it becomes better than Blast and Viral. But doing that would mean you would have never mod for Blast or Viral, which means you're basically giving up 1 damage type that doesn't really get used for 2 damage types that don't get used. So like, which option is better? And the thing is though, I'm not necessarily complaining about this because it's gotten to a weird point where Cold just keeps getting buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed to a point that it's really good now, and every time Cold does get buffed, so does Frost, And Frost is one of my favorite frames, so I'm definitely not complaining about that one. Anyway, do tell me what you think below in the comments about Cold and the bad position it's in because of its excellent elements it switches into. And tell me what you think about our new King, Blast. And let's have some rips in the chat for Slash as well. Our old King is now dead and it's been replaced by Blast of all things. But until next time, bye bye.